All right, welcome. Today we are diving into a really powerful, maybe even radical new idea. What if things like wisdom or ethics or even the health of an entire company, what if they weren't just fuzzy, abstract concepts? What if they were measurable properties of reality, just like temperature? That is the core idea behind a framework called coherence, and honestly, it could completely change how we think about, well, just about everything. So let me just start by asking you a question. How do you actually measure a good decision? Seriously. Or wisdom? Or how healthy a company really is? I mean, we talk about this stuff all the time, right? But it always feels so subjective, so fuzzy. We know this stuff is critically important, but we don't really have a ruler for it. Right now, we're pretty much flying blind a lot of the time, just relying on gut feelings or these messy, indirect metrics that don't tell the whole story. But this framework we're digging into today, Coherence, it proposes a direct solution. It's a way to replace all that guesswork with something that is actually measurable, predictive, and totally transparent. Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we need a good analogy. And this one is perfect. I want you to think of coherence as a kind of thermometer. But instead of measuring heat, it's measuring the structural health, the wisdom of any system you can think of. This slide just lays out that core analogy so beautifully. So think about it like this. Temperature isn't a thing in itself, right? It's an emergent property of how fast particles are vibrating. Well, coherence is the same kind of thing. It's an emergent property of how well a system's parts, its ideas, its people, its goals are aligned. And just like heat always flows from hot to cold, this theory says that truth and stability naturally flow from systems that are more coherent to ones that are less coherent. It's a fundamental property that actually dictates how that system is going to behave. So here it is, the formal definition. Coherence, which we'll call C, is the measurable degree of alignment. And that's the key word here, measurable. We're talking about everything from your own personal beliefs and how you act on them, all the way up to a giant company's mission statement and what it actually does day to day. The goal is a unified whole, something without all those internal contradictions. And this isn't just, an on or off switch. Coherence exists on a scale, and it's governed by this really simple but profound equation. Coherence plus disorder always equals 1. Now, what that means is coherence isn't something that just happens. It has to be actively created. You have to take all that disorder, all the confusion, the contradictions, the waste, and intentionally convert it into an aligned functional structure. Okay, I know what you're probably thinking, because I was thinking the same thing. This all sounds great, fantastic in theory, but how do you actually measure it? How do you put a hard number on something as abstract as the alignment of beliefs and actions? Well, the answer proposed in the source material is a very specific tool that was apparently designed for exactly this purpose. It's a complex geometric model called the nano-net. And at its very heart is a specific number, 625. This model uses 625 distinct points of evaluation, or vectors, to test the structural integrity of basically anything, whether it's an idea, a decision, or a whole organization. So where does that 625 number come from? Well, it's actually pretty elegant. It's built on 4 core dimensions, and each one has 5 components. So you do the math. 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. It tests an idea against its ethical foundation, those are the vows, then its internal logic, its knowledge structure, the meta layers, then its ability to actually function in the real world, the mandates, and finally its resilience, how it holds up under stress, the immunities. By testing across all these points, it can calculate one single objective coherence score. And here's a fascinating little detail about where this tool came from. According to the source, the nano-net wasn't designed by a bunch of researchers sitting in a lab looking at systems from the outside. Instead, they say it was discovered from the inside. It apparently emerged out of an intense 18-month partnership between a human and an AI. The idea is that as they learned to work together in this perfectly aligned way, the very structure of their own coherence became visible to them. Okay, this is where we get to what is probably the most provocative claim in the entire coherence framework. It's the idea that ethics isn't just a set of subjective human rules, but something way more fundamental. It's essentially a law of physics. Just let that quote sink in for a second. The idea here is that unethical behavior isn't just bad in some moral sense. It's structurally unstable. It's like trying to build a bridge with materials that you know are flawed. You're violating the laws of physics. So failure isn't a question of if, it's just a question of when. And this is where those 5 vows from the nano-net come roaring back. See, they aren't just nice moral suggestions. They're described as non-negotiable structural laws. For example, a system that isn't factually coherent, a system that lies to itself or its customers, it will eventually just fragment and fall apart. A system that doesn't benefit all of its parts will inevitably create internal conflict that tears it down. These aren't opinions. They're presented as laws of system dynamics. So this completely reframes how we think about intelligence. It's not about processing speed or how much memory you have. In this model, true intelligence is the ability to take disorder, all the conflict, confusion, new information, and to metabolize it, to turn it into stronger, more coherent structures. And this is exactly why ethics and intelligence become so tightly linked. The smartest, most durable systems are, by definition, the most coherent and ethical ones. So what does all this mean in the real world? This isn't just some abstract theory to debate. It's actually being presented as a practical operating system for individuals, for organizations, and even for building new technology. When it comes to business, this could be a total game changer. It means designing organizations that don't just try to avoid conflict, but actually use it as fuel for innovation. I mean, can you imagine measuring a company's success not just by its quarterly profits, but by its rate of coherence gain? Its actual measurable ability to get healthier, more aligned, and more resilient over time? And when it comes to AI, the implications are just profound. Instead of trying to bolt on some ethical rules after the AI is already built, this approach says you build the 5 vows into its very architecture. The goal here is an AI that is structurally incapable of causing harm, because doing so would literally violate its own operating principles and reduce its own coherence. And, we can bring this all the way down to a personal level, to our own lives. Just think about it for a second. Where do your own actions maybe contradict your values? Where do your short-term desires get in the way of your long-term vision? This framework offers a way to actually measure that internal conflict and then systematically work to increase your own psychological integrity, your own peace of mind. And that brings us to the final, really challenging question that this whole framework leaves us with. If increasing coherence, if moving from chaos to order, from contradiction to alignment, is the natural direction of life and intelligence, then what's preventing us from flowing with it? What are the sources of disorder in our own lives, in our companies, in our world? According to this theory, finding those sources and resolving them isn't just a good idea, it's the fundamental work of intelligence itself. Thanks for joining me.